You want to click?
This meeting is being recorded.
Great. So welcome to From the Ground Up. This session is Native Plant Seeds in Your Seed Library by Naomi Higo. We are scheduled to go into until 10:30 a.m. I am calling in from the traditional and unceded territories of the Kikite and Quick-Wet'lum First Nations, but I recognize we're all on different territories, so I encourage you to take a minute to thank the land you are on. Humans and Indigenous people have had a close relationship to seed throughout time. They are really part of our collective inheritance, and it's in part of our duties to care and nurture the seeds as they have done for us. So I'm really pleased that we're all joined by people who are interested in seed libraries. I just wanted to plug a Farm Folk City Folk program that's coming up. We've just got our registration for 2023 trial. This year we are doing salad turnips, radish, and peas. I'll just plop that in the chat in case anybody is interested in joining our citizen food trial. Yeah, so then, we'll get into the session. So Naomi has her bachelor's in biology from SFU and provincial instructor's diploma from VCC. She started working in the environmental education in 2012 at the Vancouver Aquarium's Wet Lab, where she got to share her passion for ocean conservation with visitors from all over the world. And she's since brought that passion and experience over with her when she joined the Douglas College team in 2018. Over the pandemic, she was inspired to start a seed library. I feel like we were all getting into seeds around that time. And she's has the Soul Garden there, which I've had the opportunity to check out a few times. So the garden specializes in providing urban gardeners with the tools and resources they need to make their home gardens more sustainable. They grow native, non-invasive, pollinator-friendly flowers, drought-tolerant plants, and indigenous medicinal plants, but that's just the tip of the iceberg. So now that she's been running this for a few years, she's ready to share her experience with you. So with that, I'll pass it over to Naomi. Thanks so much for being here.
All right, thank you so much for having me. And thank you everybody for joining us so early on a Saturday morning. I'm so impressed to see so many people up this early on the weekend. Thank you for that great introduction. And my computer is, I'll just give everyone a little warning here. My computer is very, very old and temperamental. And so David is going to share my presentation for me from his computer. And then hopefully we'll all be able to follow along and won't have any issues with sound and things like that. So David, whenever you're ready, could you please pull up the presentation?
Can you all see it?
I can see it. I can also see the outside of your computer screen. Is it full screen on yours?
Let me just try that again. I don't know, is that any better?
It still looks like it could be full screen, but it's...
Oh yeah, you're right, okay. Okay, one more
better.
time. We'll just
better, yeah. Oh, that's got the desktop again.
Oh, geez, okay, hold on a sec.
Maybe press back and then...
Okay, well, maybe we'll just do it that way again and then.
Yeah, this isn't so bad for me. And does that look okay for you too, Siri?
Yeah, it looks pretty good.
That looks pretty good. All right, I think that will do just fine. And so yes, today's topic is of course native plant seeds in your seed library. And if we go to the next screen, please, David, I'll just go through kind of the outline that I've made for this morning's presentation. There we are. So the outcomes and the agenda for today. First, I'm just going to talk really quickly about who is IUE, or the Institute of Urban Ecology. When we started the seed library, then I'm going to get into our first seed harvest, and then our first seed cleaning, including the in-person workshops that we've done. Then I'm going to go into our first seed lending, and then I'll talk a bit more about our first seed returns, and then go over sort of the reflections on this past, I guess it's kind of, we're just sort of completing our first year of a full cycle of the seed library from harvesting to returns. And so I'll just go over some of the reflections from my experience in our first year, what went well and what maybe we can do on this year. So do you mind to go to the next screen there for me, please, David? There we are. And I don't know if everyone else's is like this too. My slide is cutting off a little bit at the bottom, but I don't think we'll be missing all that much text there. So I don't think it's a big deal. So who is IUE? Who is the Institute of Urban Ecology? We talked a little bit about this in our intro, but so the Institute of Urban Ecology was founded in 1984. And the purpose of this institute was to shine a light on the nature in our cities. And our approach is twofold, and that there is some research that goes on through the institute. Over here, this is a picture here of Dr. Rob McGregor. He is the former director of the institute. He just retired, and so we'll be getting a new director soon, which is really exciting. But Dr. McGregor is an entomologist, and he spent his career studying biological pest control. And so he's the one who started our garden for his research projects. But then also on the side of the research, we also do public outreach. And all the funding for his research and these workshops, like the webinar today, are all paid for by the bursaries and grants that the director receives. And so we do both, we have free workshops that we do in schools. This time of year, we go to schools kind of all around the Lower Mainland and deliver free workshops. And then we also host monthly workshops, usually in our soul garden, once a month, usually about the last Monday of the month is our kind of theme right now. We call those our monthly Mondays. And do you mind going to the next slide there for me, please, David? I think I should mention as well, if anyone has any questions while I'm going through the presentation, and Siri, are you keeping an eye on the chat?
Yeah, keeping an eye on it.
Perfect. Yeah, so just type your questions into the chat there, and then Siri, feel free to jump in and interrupt me with those questions whenever you want. And so IUE started in 1984, but the Soul Garden was constructed only about 15 years ago. And I shouldn't say only, that's a pretty old garden. And the SOL, the SOL, stands for Sustainability, Outreach, and Learning. And it is located at the Douglas College Coquitlam campus, if anyone is around there. And so over here we have a picture of, this was the day of the grand opening of the garden. And then kind of in behind we have a picture of the garden from last year. I should note as well, the garden is set up to do a big renovation this year. So hopefully we'll have some new exciting photos and things to do with that. But the Soul Garden is our research grounds and model for sustainable land use. And as Siri mentioned again at the beginning, we grow native, non-invasive species, pollinator-friendly plants. We have sacred indigenous medicinal plants, a wild hedgerow, and positive post-insectary plants. And if you're wondering what any of those words mean, like insectary, that's one of the topics that we would hold one of our monthly workshops on, for example. I'm just kind of talking about the different types of plants. And so yes, in the summer of 2020, I was inspired to start the IUB Seed Library from the seeds in our garden.
Naomi, I have a question. Can anyone just drop in by the garden anytime?
Yes, you can. Yeah, it's located right at the front of the Douglas College campus. So like right on the corner of Pine Tree and Town Center, whatever it is there. There's no gate around it. There's no locked doors. People are welcome to walk through whenever. Again, I'll warn you right now, it is set to undergo renovation. So there's not much exciting happening right now. But hopefully, fingers crossed, we'll have a brand new big shiny garden in January is supposed to be the finish date, but it might be a little bit later. If you can go to the next slide for me, please, David. So our first seed harvest. And so during the pandemic, we weren't able to host any in-person workshops, which is what I spend most of my time doing. Dr. Rob McGregor, you saw in that little photo previously, he's the one who would apply for all the bursaries and grants and get the money for his research. Then I get to spend my outreach. It's a pretty sweet gig. But obviously in 2020, we couldn't do those in-person workshops. And so I spent most of that year making videos of various topics that we'd normally teach in the classroom and collecting seeds from the Soul Garden. And as I was collecting those seeds, I recorded everything I did in the garden for future use, kind of knowing that eventually I would make videos out of this footage. And so in our first year of seed harvesting, the native seeds that I gathered, we gathered much more than this, but specifically the native seeds that we collected were from Douglas aster, fireweed, goldenrod, large-leaved lupin, Lewis's mock orange, nodding onion, Nootka rose, Oregon grape, oloberry, salal, thimbleberry, western columbine or red columbine, and western honeysuckle and yarrow. All right, next slide, please, David. And so our first seed cleaning. So after I gathered all these seeds in the garden, I was like, okay, now what? And so as I started doing more research on seed cleaning methods, I realized that I was way over my head as a newcomer. And so in 2021, I found Farm Folk City Folk and their mobile seed cleaning unit. And I hired them to come host a seed cleaning workshop at our Soul Garden for myself to learn, and also, of course, for the public to learn too. And this on the right here, this was the poster that we used to advertise that workshop. That was back in August 30th of 2021. Because I think at that time, the restrictions were easing with COVID and you were allowed to have small gatherings outside. And so we were really, really fortunate that that worked out, that we could hold this workshop in person because it was gardening outside. And to date, this is still one of our most popular workshops and is definitely something that we're going to continue to do every year and keep that partnership growing. And so it wasn't until that workshop really with Farm Folk City Folk that I learned about how to thresh seeds and how to sort them by size and by weight. And so some very, very valuable information was learned by all there. And next, please. All right, so after that workshop, and I learned how to properly clean the seeds, and with the help of the people at that workshop and some student assistants, I was finally able to lend out the seeds that I had harvested all the way back in the summer of 2020. And before I did this, though, I still kind of was trying to figure out what is the best way to get seeds out to people. Again, we were still in a bit of a pandemic, and so in-person stuff wasn't necessarily always okay. And so I contacted the Surrey Seed Library, and they had some really good advice, and I followed their advice for our first year, and I think I'm going to continue to do so as well. And so what they advise, what they do with their library is that the seeds are all sent out through the mail. And so there is no actual physical library, which again works really well in a pandemic, but also works well, every day as well. And so we listed all of our seeds online. We have an online brochure, which looks like, you can see these first couple of pictures here, the black-eyed Susans and the blanket flower, field chickweed. Those are just kind of a couple little snapshots of what our seed library catalog looks like. But Siri has the link to that, and she's going to pop that into the chat for you. And so if you want to copy it or save it onto your computer, you can find our catalog for this year. We have a couple of new additions. If you're familiar with our library, we've got some new flowers in there, like this one here, the blanket flower. Also, what the Surrey Seed Library recommended is that they don't just give all the seeds away all year long. They release them in a more structured, kind of organized manner. And so we release seeds seasonally based on the time of when they actually need to be sown. And so we release the seeds 3 times a year. We have our winter sowing seeds, we have our early spring seeds, and then we also have our late spring seeds. And so rather than just sending out all the seeds all at once at one time in the year, this way it makes it easier for us to process and package the seeds. And I think it makes it also easier for the gardeners to not lose the seeds once you get them in the mail, right? If we sent out seeds that don't need to be sown until June, right now, chances are, those could get misplaced, or maybe they may not be stored properly in your home. And so by releasing them at the exact time of when they need to be sown, we're not losing seeds. And it also highlights a very important factor with native plant seeds, which is that a lot of them need to be cold stratified. A lot of these seeds actually do need to be released and sown in the winter, which is something kind of counterintuitive for gardeners here. We usually think about starting our gardens in the spring, when things start to warm and get sunnier and brighter. But for native plant seeds, a lot of native plant seeds, they actually need to be sown in the winter. Oh, do you mind hopping back again for me, David, really quick?
Yeah, we have one question in the chat, Naomi. Well, kind of 2 questions. So 1, where are the seeds stored? And then 2, do you have any tips about protecting seeds going through the mail?
So 1, we store our seeds in paper envelopes. The paper allows them to breathe, and if there is any moisture in there, we make sure that they're all really nicely dried before we put them into the paper envelopes. And so we'll either stash them in a paper bag, or if they were harvested on kind of a rainy day, we'll lay them out on some paper towels and keep them out for a few days to make sure that they're as dry as possible. And then we put them into the paper envelopes again to keep them dry. And those envelopes are all kept in a box about yay big on a bookshelf that's in my office. And I'm lucky because my office doesn't have any outside windows. Yes, lucky for seeds. So my office doesn't have any outside windows, so it's only the artificial light in there. And also the air conditioning in my office is always on super, super high. And so my office stays nice and dark and cool naturally most of the year. And so that is where we keep our seeds. We'll kind of get into this maybe later on again, but because this is just our first year, none of our seeds are really that old. And so we haven't considered yet if we should start putting any into the refrigerator to extend their life expectancy, or just kind of keep using the newer seeds, the seeds from the previous year's harvest. That's something that we'll have to figure out down the road. And in terms of protecting the seeds in the male seeds, as far as I know, the seeds that we have anyways, they're all pretty hard. They've all got pretty hard seed coats on them. And with the proper cleaning that we do with farm folk, city folk, we make sure that anything that came from a soft, fruity body is properly cleaned, again, and dried. And again, we package them in these cute little envelopes here. If you can see on the far right of that slide, there's these cute little envelopes with our tree logo on them. We put the seeds into these little origami envelopes, which are pretty good at holding even teeny tiny seeds. They don't shake out very easy. But we put a label across the back crease there just in case. But as far as I know, there shouldn't really be any issues in the male. Seeds themselves are pretty hardy and pretty strong. And yeah, they should survive the male just fine. I don't know if David or Siri, if you have any other thoughts on seeds in the male.
Yeah, not really. I feel like most of our libraries are only mailing within BC, and there's not much you can do to protect them from harsh weather conditions outside. But at least in BC, like everything's gonna get to somebody in a week. I would maybe be a bit more concerned if it was going farther. But yeah, I feel like seeds can, as you say, they can make it a week in slightly unfavorable conditions. Hopefully the male people are taking care of our seeds.
Yeah, David, do you have any advice on that?
I'd echo that. I know a lot of people will use bubble envelopes and stuff to send seeds, but I mean, if the seeds are pretty hardy, so as long as maybe a little padding in there would help, but you don't even really need to. They travel fairly well through the mail.
I think I saw one more question pop up there as well.
Somebody asked who pays for postage.
Good question. Yes, so luckily, because the Institute of Urban Ecology is based out of Douglas College will pay for our postage. It's sent out through the college's mailing system. Yeah. So yes, where was I here? So yes, the seeds are released seasonally based on the timing of when they need to be sown. And so when we do have new seeds ready to be released, we advertise them on social media, on our Facebook and our Instagram page. We also have a monthly email newsletter that we send out to anyone who wants to subscribe to that, and we'll advertise those seeds through there. And then I just have some printed posters around the college as well. All right, if you want to skip to the next one there, David.
Maybe before we get on the slide, one more question. Do you indicate on the mailing envelope that there are seeds inside?
No, I don't. Again, because they're sort of in a paper envelope within the mailing envelope, they do have a little bit of extra padding. And they're, depending on how many seeds people request, they're just in your standard sort of letter envelopes. And so no, I don't put like fragile or anything on them. I figured, most of the time when I get a paper letter in the mail, it doesn't come all, my letters don't come all crumpled and stomped on. I find that they take pretty good care of just your lettered envelopes. I might be more concerned if I put it in something like a box. I feel like the boxes have a bigger chance of being tossed and thrown around, but with just a nice light paper envelope, again, even if it does get tossed around in the mail, they're light, they're gonna kind of float like a paper plane, hopefully, rather than crash around like a heavy box would. That's something I could maybe check in on with people and see if anyone had any trouble with their seeds arriving. I didn't hear anything about that issue this year, but I could maybe reach out and ask people. But yeah, so after our first lending season, from September 2021 to July 2022, so that was, again, one full cycle of the winter seeds, early spring seeds, and late spring seeds. We had lent out seeds to 53 people. And out of those 53 people, 5 people returned seeds to us. But the catch here is that they were not seeds from our plants. And we'll talk about that a little bit more. And so to help people grow and harvest their own seeds after we sent them to them, we did several things. One, we held a workshop about cold stratification in January 2022. That was this poster here. And we're going to be doing this workshop a little bit earlier this year, the same workshop we're doing at the end of this month. I feel like with how warm kind of last year was, the end of January specifically was a bit too late to be cold stratifying the seeds for some of the seeds. So we're going to do this month instead. So we hold this monthly workshop about cold stratification native plant seeds. We also have created a YouTube playlist with specific videos on how to harvest seeds from every one of the plants that we have in our soul garden. Now, we haven't finished every single one of those videos yet, but I think we have about 21 videos up there right now. And Siri has the link for that YouTube playlist as well, which she will share with you in the chat. And so again, we're going to eventually have one specific video for every type of seed that we carry in the soul garden. And so that's to help people, recognize, what is the seed in this plant? That's one of the questions I think I got a lot when we were doing our first seed cleaning with Siri at the garden, is that a lot of people were just like, what is the seed? What am I looking for here? Because the seeds, they don't always look the same from plant to plant. And so hopefully these videos will help people not only recognize what to look for on the plant, but the easiest way to sort of collect those seeds and the best time to collect them too, right? You don't want to harvest them too early, you don't want to harvest them too late. And then we also created a Facebook group, an IUE Seed Library Facebook group, to keep in contact with anybody who wanted to keep in contact, right? We're not forcing anybody to join this group, but I sent the link out to all these 53 people who we sent seeds to and invited them to join the Facebook group if they wanted to. And then through the group, we can kind of keep in contact more and see how the people are doing after they got their seeds. And we were growing seeds at our garden as well to see what was viable and what wasn't. And we could share stories of what seeds we had success with and which ones we didn't have success with. And people were able to interact and talk to each other too and get advice through that group. And I think that was a very valuable resource. And then I think it was in July that I just sent out one more email, and I don't like to spam people with emails, so I try not to send things out too often, just sort of the very most necessary emails. So in July, I think it was, I sent out one more email again to the 53 people that checked out seeds, just with this information here on the side. It has our mailing address on it and the things that we would like to see labeled on your seed packages, such as the name of the seed, the scientific name if you happen to know it, and the date and the location of where those seeds were harvested. And Do you mind skipping the next one, Dave? Do we have another question pop up again?
Yes, we do. So do you test germination on the seeds? And then another question, any tips for seeds that go dormant or require stratification, etc.?
Yes, we do test the seeds. I'm going to talk about that, I think, in the next slide. We do test the seeds and tips for stratification. So yes, again, the native plant seeds, a lot of them do need that period of cold stratification. And so when we release the list of the winter sowing seeds again, on social media, in our newsletter, and people reach out to us, so again, the nice thing about having everything online is that it's easy to speak back and forth, to communicate back and forth. That's the word I'm looking for. And so we'll advertise our seeds on Facebook, let's say, and then on the Facebook ad, it won't have all the details on there, but it'll say for more information, please send us an email at iewe@douglascollege.com. And so if someone is interested in checking out seeds from the library, they'll hopefully send us an email to iewe@douglascollege.ca. And then we'll respond with a full list of the seeds that are available at that time. So right now it would be a full list of the winter sowing seeds. We would also include a link to that seed library brochure that you will have a link to as well, because in the brochure, for each plant, it goes into the details of the growing conditions and the sowing conditions. And there's some other resources there as well. So people can hopefully take a look and see which seeds will do well in the conditions that they have in their garden. And we mentioned as well, when we release those winter seeds, we say that these ones need to be sown now. These need to be winter sown, and you can either do that by just throwing them outside in your garden right now and hoping for the best, or we have some video resources to help you, and we'll send again links to our YouTube channel where those videos are located. And then again, we're going to host this in-person workshop about cold stratification on the 30th of this month, I think. So we have written information that we share in the email. We have the brochure that has, again, the growing and sowing conditions. We have videos about cold stratification as well as the seed cleaning. And then we do the in-person workshops, if that helps answer that question. And then, yes, we do test the seeds, and I'll talk a little bit more about that in a second. Another really important thing to note about our seeds from the Soul Garden is that everything in the Soul Garden is open pollinated. And so we don't go around, we don't try to manipulate the plants in any way. We just let nature sort of take its course. And within the garden itself, we don't grow any different species of the same genus. So that means like plants that could potentially make hybrids. So for example, we only have one type of aster. We have the Douglas aster. We don't have any other species of aster that might, be able to cross-pollinate and make a hybrid. But because it's open pollinated, there is still a possibility from pollen from further away to be carried into the garden. I think this is what might have happened with our purple coneflower, or echinacea. We used to have a lot of purple coneflower in the garden, and I don't know when, but the city of Coquitlam also planted echinacea across the road. We're right across the road from Lafarge Lake, and the city of Coquitlam planted some echinacea around Lafarge Lake and also right beside the Lafarge Lake SkyTrain station. But they didn't just plant the wild purple variety. They also had a red and a white and a pink variety, which I don't know if those are natural wild types or if those are cultivars or hybrids. I don't know if Siri or David know anything about them. But there's a possibility that the red, the white, and that pink variety of echinacea are not wild natural types. And so maybe the pollen is not viable from those plants, or crossing them with our wild type purple coneflower didn't work out because our coneflowers have slowly disappeared. We didn't get any back again this year. So it is a possibility for cross-pollination to happen. But you generally, with these wild native plants, you don't have to worry about as many hybrids because they haven't been cultivated and modified, selectively bred as much as a lot of the food crops have, right? Like the brassicas, for example, right? Originally, those all came from one wild native plant, and then farmers got their hands on them and started selectively breeding them to create those different brassicas that we have now. I don't even know all of them, but I think like the Brussels sprouts and the broccolis and the mustards, if I'm correct, or they can all cross-pollinate because at one point they all came from that one same plant. When you let nature naturally select the pollinating the plants, then you don't get those crazy cultivars and divergence coming from the same lineage quite as fast. Right? The evolution of a new species from one species in nature would take thousands and thousands and thousands of years. So we don't have to worry about as many hybrids as you would when you're growing these more modified fruits and vegetable crops. And yes, to test the viability of the seeds that we harvested, we tried growing most of those seeds ourselves. And this here is a picture of one of 4 of the growing racks that we have outside at our New Westminster campus. So our garden is located at the Coquitlam campus, but my office is located at the New Westminster campus. And so over winter, I'm spending most of my time at the New Westminster campus and doing those school programs. So it was just easier for me to monitor and take care of the seedlings at New Westminster rather than Coquitlam. We also have a safer space at New Westminster for these seedlings. We have several rooftop patios that the public can't just walk by and access. Like the Soul Garden at Coquitlam is open access to the public 24/7. These rooftop patios are contained within the college, and so the seedlings are a little bit more protected there. And so we tested most of the things, and the only seed that I can remember that I tested that did not germinate this year was the Western honeysuckle. I forget exactly how many seeds we tried, but I didn't get any honeysuckle to germinate, which was unfortunate. But in this picture here, you can see lots of the Western red columbine, aster down here. And I made sure to test or germinate a lot of the purple coneflower seeds that we did have, just so that I can try to get those plants back into the garden again. And I did have lots of purple coneflower germinate as well. And next slide, please.
Great, and we did have a question come up. So what are your thoughts on genetic diversity of the plants and sending the seeds to geographic areas outside of the Lower Mainland?
Great question. Yes, that is a no-no for us. Another thing that we mentioned either in our social media posts or in the initial email that we send out to people about the seed library is that we will only supply our seeds to people living from Squamish to Hope. That is the extent to which we feel comfortable sending these seeds, because outside of that area, I don't know the ecosystems quite as well, and I don't know what's considered more native there, if anything could become more invasive. So yes, unfortunately, we only supply our seeds to people living from Squamish to Hope. That's the extent of our range. Yeah, good question. And so now, looking back on our first year of harvesting, lending, and returns, these are the things that I think went really well. We have almost 1,000 views on our seed library YouTube playlist, which is great. So that tells me that people are using that resource and finding value in it. Also, the amount of seeds that we harvested just from our own garden, because for year one we got a couple of donations. Actually, I shouldn't say, we did get some seeds donated to us, but the majority of the seeds that we had to lend year one were just what we had harvested ourselves from our garden, and it was a good fit for the number of people that we shared with. So we didn't have a whole lot of seeds left over, and we didn't run out very much. There was a couple of things that we maybe ran out of, but for the most part, we had a good amount of seeds for the number of people that we were lending them out to. And usually it's hard to say how many seeds we put in a package, because it depended on how many of that seed we had. You know, we have some plants that are prolific seed makers, like the goldenrod and Douglas aster. And so for those packages, we could give people quite a few of those seeds. And then we had some other plants like the Western honeysuckle where we didn't get as many seeds from. And so people may only get like 4 or 5 seeds from that type of plant. And so we tried to ration out the seeds that way based on how much we had and trying to give people an appropriate amount. And overall, I think people really appreciated all of those extra online resources that we made, like that brochure, like the YouTube videos and the Facebook group. There's, even though, well, I mean, this isn't counting the people that we've added to the seed library since July, but I don't think it's all, we haven't got a whole lot of new people yet. So we lent out seeds to 53 people, but we have 92 members in our Facebook group. And so again, that tells me that people are finding value in these resources, and maybe before they even ask for seeds from us, they might find the Facebook group and join and ask a few questions on there and search around and see, okay, is this a good fit for me? And for that Facebook group as well, that group is also selective, and there's some questions you have to answer before the group will just automatically let you in. And one of those is, again, that you have to live within that range where we send seeds to, so you have to live between Squamish and Hope. Our in-person workshops are always a hit. That's both the seed cleaning one with farm folk, city folk, and the winter sowing cold stratification workshop. And then also, again, we're in this really kind of unique position in terms of seed libraries, in that we have our soul garden to harvest the seeds from. And so even if we don't get a lot of seeds returned from other people, we have our garden every year to keep harvesting seeds and to kind of keep feeding and seeding our own library, which I know a lot of seed libraries don't, because they're run out of, you know, book libraries. So we're really lucky in that sense. Next slide, please. And so these were the challenges that we've come across in this past year. And so again, only 5 out of 53 people returned seeds to us, and those seeds were not from our plants. And I actually think 5 out of 53 is a pretty big number for returns. I was expecting less people than that. But as our first year, I was pretty happy to see 5 people return seeds to us. But again, they weren't from our plants. They were from other plants that they had in their gardens. And I think this is because, one, native perennials, like the plants that we have in our soul garden, so like Nootka rose, mock orange, even the purple coneflower, they have longer life cycles, and they often don't flower on their first year. And it may take several years before the plants are large and mature enough to really produce enough seeds to share, right? So even with all of the seedlings that we tested, most of them didn't flower this year. Most of them didn't flower, and that includes the Western red columbine, which was probably one of our most successful germinators. They got lots of leaves, but the columbines often don't flower until year 2. And so, you know, people, even if they had success growing, getting the seedlings to germinate, They may not have got flowers this year. They probably didn't get flowers this year. And then based on those discussions from the Facebook group and through the follow-up email, the one email that I sent in July with our mailing address and how to return seeds to us, based on discussions following that email and in the Facebook group, many people just didn't have success with germinating the seeds. And a lot of people were very modest and said, oh, I'm new to gardening. It must have been me. I must have done something wrong, or that could mean that maybe potentially mailing the seeds isn't working or there's something else going on there. And the other issue is, I'm missing the bottom part of this slide, but I think what it says is that the native plant seeds are best when they're started naturally outside. And this past growing season was very strange. It was very hot and very dry. And unfortunately for us, that's what killed a lot of our seedlings that did germinate, was those long periods of hot, dry weather. Unfortunately, I don't have an irrigation system set up where I have the seedlings growing on the rooftop patios. I've tucked them into the shadiest corners that I can find. But even then, if there was a long weekend where it was really hot and sunny and no one there to take care of those seedlings, we lost a lot of seedlings over those hot, dry, long weekends. And that might have been the case for a lot of other people too, right? Summertime, we like to go away on vacation. There's not always someone around to take care of our gardens for us. And unfortunately, these seedlings are really, really delicate and sensitive to those extreme changes in weather. And so that might have been a big issue this year as well. And next slide.
And we had one question. Do you find problems with returning seeds, like seed quality or seeds description or other issues?
Seed quality, no. The seeds that we've gotten back, or at least in terms of germinate them yet, because again, I've just sort of received these seeds back. But the quality of them looks good. Like they have been cleaned fairly well. And in terms of the labeling, most of them have the common names of the plants, but not necessarily the scientific. And I'm okay with that because unless you're like 100% sure of what that plant, the scientific name is of that plant, it's probably safest just to use the common name. And again, I don't know if these are coming from any cultivars or anything like that. And so we keep our donated seeds and the seeds we harvest separate. And so our seeds, for most of the plants, we do know the scientific names either from the catalog from way back then when they built the garden, or from the new plants that we've bought. When I get donated seeds, if I lend out any donated seeds, I will usually just put on the package the common name, and then in brackets it'll say species unknown, and it was donated this year. Is all the information I'll put on those donated seeds. Yeah. But in terms of quality, they've all looked pretty good so far. And quantity, it depends on the person. I had a school that I partnered with sent me the largest package of marigold seeds that I've ever seen. Probably it's a huge pack of marigold seeds, and so we have lots of marigolds to give out. And again, on their package, they labeled it as a mixed variety of marigolds as well. Some of them were dwarf, some of them were regular, and so that's just a mixed donated bag of marigold seeds. That's as much detail as we know about that, donated from Surrey. Yeah, good question. And so this year, these are the things that I think we're going to try to help alleviate some of those challenges that we just talked about there. And so first of all, last year I was really, really focused on teaching people how to harvest seeds and how to clean seeds. That's why we had the workshop with Farm Folk, City Folk. We did one again this summer. And again, we have all those videos that show people how to harvest their seeds and how to clean the seeds. But this year, I think, again, based on that feedback from the Facebook group and the emails, I think I need to focus more on how to germinate those seeds, those native seeds, especially if you're doing winter sowing methods. So we do the one workshop on cold stratification, but I maybe need to do more. Also, do germination workshops in the spring and late spring as well, and kind of talk about those new challenges. Like I said, what do you do when it gets really, really hot and dry out and you've got a vacation booked? What are some things that you can do to help protect those seedlings in those extreme weather? So that's something that I think we definitely need to add this year. And so from all those seedlings that we tested, or the seeds that we tested, I now have a patio full of these gorgeous little seedling plants. And I'm going to use some of those seedlings to repopulate our new garden. When the new garden is made, I'm going to put some of those seedlings back into the new garden. But one of the things we could consider in the future as well is lending out those seedlings to people who are most dedicated to the seed library. So maybe those 5 people who return seeds to us, we can offer them some of the seedlings that we've germinated. And in that way, they kind of get a leg up on harvesting seeds from their own plants, right? Those 5 people have shown us they know how to harvest seeds and they know how to clean seeds. And, they're eager and willing and really want to be a part of the seed lending community. And so maybe if they had, asked for some Western red columbine seeds from us and theirs didn't germinate, I can give them, a seedling of ours and be like, hey, here, I know you really wanted this plant. Here's a seedling, better luck with this one. Hopefully, you'll get to harvest some seeds from this one in the future. I made a note there as well, kind of creating tiers within the library, or like goals for people to reach. So you have, maybe it's your first year getting seeds from our library, or trying to grow anything from seed. Then so your success level might just be getting things to germinate, right? And then if you're successful at that, we can be like, oh, great, and have some kind of a reward for that. Maybe, giving them a seedling or something like that. And so that's something that we are going to I'm definitely going to consider, especially because those perennials do take quite a long time to mature. I think to kind of help speed up the rate of seed return, it would be beneficial for us to lend out, to give people seedlings as well as just seeds, right? If it's going to take 2 years for the seedling or the seed to make seeds, here's a seedling that'll hopefully make seeds this year. And I might expand our local region to include Squamish, but that is a yes. We have decided that we are going to expand the area for which we lend seeds to include Squamish. It used to be Vancouver to Hope. Now we're doing Squamish to Hope. I feel like that is still a safe space. And then again, I can't see. Dave, is there another bulletin below that one that I can't see? My screen's a little bit cut off.
No, that's the end of that one.
That's the last one. All right, let's go to the next slide then, please. There it is. So that concludes my presentation and my story on, again, our first year, first full year of running our native plant seed library. And so I hope that, by sharing my story with you, it might help you with your seed library or gardening experience in the future. And at this point, I'm just going to open it up for some more question and answers.
Yeah, feel free to drop your questions in the chat, or you're open to unmute yourself, but just reminding you that this is a recorded session. While we wait for any questions to come in, just wanted to remind you that we have our citizen seed trial open, and we're doing salad turnips, radishes, and peas this year. I'll put the link of that in the chat. And it looks like we've gotten a couple questions. So the first one is, how involved in the garden research, kids program, and seed library is the college and students or programs at the college? So I guess they're asking, how much work do you do with the students as well at the college?
Yeah. So with the previous garden, again, the garden is set to undergo a huge expansion and renovation. But with the previous garden, it was managed and maintained solely by the Institute of Urban Ecology. And so that means myself, and then we would hire a couple of student assistants from the college. So these are students who are studying either at Douglas, or they can actually be studying at any college or university around BC. And so we would have paid working positions, which are great for our students, who would come and help maintain the garden. But it works out kind of nice for me because I only do the education outreach stuff, schools. I do school workshops mostly from September to June, and then July, August, there's no school in session. And so I have those months to focus most of my time on taking care of that garden and having those garden workshops as well. But with the new garden, we're making a stronger partnership with the Indigenous Student Union at the college. We do in the old garden, we do grow some plants for the Indigenous Student Union, but we haven't had any of their students really come and work in the garden. And that's just because of the functionality of the space. It's really not an easy space to work in. And sometimes it's not even the safest space to work in. And so with the new garden, we're going to make it more accessible to students and volunteers who want to come and help work in the garden. So for example, with the old garden, there's only one hose hookup, and the hose is stored all the way at the very far corner of the college back in the shipping and receivings department. And that's actually where all of our garden tools are kept, because we don't have a safe place to keep them in the garden. Again, having the garden open to the public 24/7, we can't just have garden tools lying about. They'd have to be in a safe, locked space. We don't have that. So all of our gardening tools are kept way, way back in a storage room. And we can't just have random students walking into the shipping and receivings department to grab a hose or a bucket for compost or things like that. So right now, it's only possible for our hired student assistants to access where the gardening supplies are. But with the new garden, we're changing that. We're going to have a locked little storage shed in the garden, some kind of a shareable lockbox, so that if student volunteers or other students want to help work in the garden, it'll be easier for them to do so. I think, was there a question there about the research as well? I can see it. I can just scroll back up here. The research, we try to get the public involved with our research as much as possible. I won't go into too much about that right now. But we have what we call citizen science projects. And one of them right now is on ground beetles and the spread of this newly introduced ground beetle. And so, yes, we like to use our citizen scientists as much as possible, because as a not-for-profit, we don't have the money for these big, expensive laboratories and dozens of graduate students and stuff. We can usually hire one or two student assistants to help. But then we really depend on the public to help us expand our research. Kids programs. I don't do any kids programs in the garden right now. most of the kid school programs are done at their school. And so if that school happens to have a garden, then we can do a garden workshop in their school. But kind of the big draw with our school programs is that one, they're free for the teachers to book. And then two, I go to them. We come to their location to do the workshop, so they don't have to worry about booking a school bus, getting parent volunteers, out and doing the whole traveling, coming to us bit. We go to them at no cost to them. So if the school has a garden, we'll do a workshop in their garden. No problem. I'm happy to do it. And for the seed library, the biggest involvement with the public with that right now is during that seed cleaning workshop with farm folk, city folk. And so I hope that helped answer most of it. Let me know if you need clarification on any of that, but I'll scroll down to the next question here. Can you talk a little more about the tiered reward system to get more engagement? I cannot yet, because this is a new idea that I'm thinking of introducing this year. Again, right now, the only thing I'm thinking is, again, setting goals for people to reach. And then again, okay, if you are, if you learn how to clean and harvest seeds from your own plants, whether it's something that we lent you or not, but if you come to our workshop or watch a video and learn how to clean and harvest seeds and actually return something to us, that could be one goal mark, one tick mark. And then, hopefully we can, again, maybe give them a seedling or something like that. I have to think about how exactly that would work, but just something to kind of, especially with these perennials, something to keep people engaged in the long term, because this could take more than a year, more than a couple of years before their plants are actually big enough to start actually producing seeds. Yeah, so just kind of keeping those community connections. Next question is, how do you find working with a community through online means, YouTube, social media? Is it different folks from the in-person activities? Absolutely it is. Yes, it's. I really like the online resources because it's easier for people who don't live in Coquitlam, right? Our garden is located in Coquitlam. If you don't live in Coquitlam, if you live in Hope or Squamish, let's say, chances are you're not going to drive out to come to one of my 1-hour workshops in our garden. And so YouTube, social media, Zoom like this have been great tools to help us reach people outside of Coquitlam specifically. I find the people that come to our workshops are usually Coquitlam, Port Moody kind of area, the Tri-Cities area there. Next question is, what software do you use for the seed description? Do you mean the seed library brochure? Is that what you're referring to there, Samar? Yes, excellent. Yes, that program is an online program called PictoChart. I can type it in here for you. It's Picto with a K chart. Very, very similar to Canva. If anyone has used Canva before. I have never used Canva. I'm sure it's just as good, but when I was doing my provincial instructor's diploma at VCC, PictoChart was the program that they introduced to at that time. And it's really great because you can add, it has all these beautiful kind of preset templates. But the best thing is that you can add live links into the brochure. And so beside each flower, I have a short description of what it, the growing and sowing conditions. But then there's also always a link or two below that you can click on that'll take you to another website like West Coast Seeds or Plan B Natives or something like that that has more details about that plant. Yeah. All right, next question. Do you find that gardeners transfer their skills from food gardening to native plants and saving their seeds, or are there different skills needed? Maybe that might be a better question for David or Siri to answer, because we don't grow much of any food in our garden. It's not an agricultural garden. It is, again, it's meant for habitat restoration. We have medicinal indigenous plants, pollinator-friendly plants, and native non-invasive species, but we don't grow a lot of food. So maybe David or Siri, would one of you be able to chime in on that one?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I'd say that there's definitely a difference, but all skills of seed saving are transferable. Typically, the garden plants we save from don't need stratification, but there are the odd ones that do. So, but for the most part, they're easier to germinate, I think, than a lot of the native plants. And of course, you're working with perennials, and most of our garden seed are either usually annuals, but sometimes biennials, but we rarely have, perennial seed saving in vegetable gardening.
But I think areas like sometimes people have trouble locating the seed. I feel like that's very similar no matter whether it's native or food crop. You're kind of looking for the same thing after the flower, what's next. So that skills are transferable, and also seed cleaning is fairly similar whether it's a garden crop or a native plant.
Yeah, and I mean, I didn't even know that the vegetable gardens are mostly annual. So there we go. I learned something new today too. Um, but yeah, I think kind of at least the basic skills that Siri has taught us at the seed cleaning workshops, like the threshing, how to use the screens, and the wind cleaning. I think those are definitely transferable skills when it comes to food and wildflowers. It just all depends on the fruiting body. What kind of fruit does that seed come in? Is it in the fleshy fruit that we eat, or is it in a dry fruit that doesn't even look like a fruit? All right, and there's another question here from Nick. How do you find the logistics of mailing seeds? Do you see it scalable as you grow? Tips and tricks. Can I ask you to clarify what you mean by the logistics of mailing the seeds, Nick?
I guess I'm more thinking from running a seed bank up in Creston, like the logistics of packing and labeling and mailing, and especially if you're using origami envelopes, can be a lot. So I'm just wondering, do you have a really good system that you found for doing that? Are you using technology or systems that really simplify that, and kind of, how have you found that experience? And is it, as you get more people, more than 53, do you see that easily growing, or will you hit a point where that becomes more of a challenge? If that clarifies that.
Yes, it does. Thank you very much. Yes, definitely making those origami seed envelopes takes a lot of time. I like them right now because, again, as a not-for-profit, the paper and print, we have like our logo printed on the front. And when you open up the packages, it has our contact information inside. And so as a not-for-profit based out of the college, those cost me zero money to make. The paper and office supplies using the printer, that's all paid for by the college. And so that's why I started using those right now. And again, I'm lucky in the position that we're able to hire student assistants to help. And so my student assistants do a lot of that origami folding, and it's very time consuming for them. But I think the biggest thing that helps with that is, again, only releasing the seeds seasonally. And so by restricting what we have available throughout the year, so like right now, people can only request and receive our winter sowing seeds. And so we don't have to worry about packaging everything that we have, right, and getting everything ready. And I think I should mention as well, we don't really pre-package the seeds. Everything stays in their large envelopes in that box on my air-conditioned shelf. And then when somebody requests seeds, so let's say they request 10 different types of winter sowing seeds, then we can make those 10 envelopes, fill them, label them, and mail them out. We do, obviously, when the student assistants have spare time, or I have spare time, we'll be pre-folding envelopes. We always have at least a small stack of pre-folded envelopes available. But yeah, it saves a lot of time, because at the beginning I started to pre-package the seeds, but then I realized, I was packaging too much yarrow. Not everyone wanted yarrow. More people wanted honeysuckle or butterfly milkweed. And so I just kind of stopped pre-packaging them and waited for people to send in their requests and just package the seeds on an as-needed basis. But as the library grows, we might have to transition from the hand-folded envelopes to a normal paper, swipe and seal envelope. Maybe get a little stamp to put our information on the outside of the envelope. Yeah, if it starts to get too much for the students to fold those envelopes, then we might have to look at buying some. But yeah, definitely packaging the seeds to order and releasing them seasonally helps cut back on the workload. You're welcome. All right, next question. What have your team's discussions been around the number of packages members can request? And do you presently have a suggested number or top number without direct communication with you? No, right now we don't restrict what people can grow. Again, we send out the brochure, the seed library brochure, and advise people to look at it and see what would work best for their conditions. And I find that most people are very responsive with that, and that they'll even follow up and have questions, and they go, oh, okay, well, I just have a small plot. It's about 3 feet by 3 feet. It's in the shade, and if they want more guidance and advice on which seeds would do well, they'll actually reach out and ask more questions and ask for more guidance. And then we can kind of advise them, okay, if you have a small plot, here's some smaller plants that would do well. But no, we don't set a limit on what people can grow. For example, we had one person reach out from Hope, and again, without us even having to ask, just voluntarily in her email, she says, hi, my name is so-and-so. I just moved into this new house in Hope, and I have a huge yard. I don't know what to grow in it, but I do want to add some more native plants. I found your seed library. I was hoping that you could help me out with this project. And just with a couple of emails back and forth with her, I could tell that she had a huge yard and tons of space for these native plants. And so she looked at the catalog, sent me a list of all the things that she wanted, which I think was pretty much everything for the winter sowing. And I happily sent her a package of everything. And again, kind of the nice thing about packaging the seeds by order or by request is, if there is someone who isn't, who you maybe suspect is just being a little bit greedy and is like, I want everything, give me one of everything, right? With no questions or anything like that. You can adjust how many seeds you put in the package, because I don't say that, oh yeah, you're going to get such and such many seeds. If I suspect that there's somebody, who, and I get their mailing address, you have to send me your mailing address so I can mail the seeds. And if I see an address for downtown Vancouver asking for one of everything, I can put a smaller amount in each of those packages, kind of knowing that you probably don't have space for all of these plants, but I'll give you a little sample of each one so you can see what will germinate, what will grow, and wish you the best success with that. Did that help you at all? I hope that helps.
I'm just while we have a lull in questions here, I'm just gonna plop, we'll throw it in the chat at the end as well. It's just a link to a survey. We would love to hear feedback from people about each of the sessions. So if you can click that link before the end of this session, and you're welcome to skip questions, but fill out as much as makes sense to you. It's so great to see so many people here, like you say, Naomi, at 9 in the morning on a weekend. And we've had so many new seed libraries reach out to us and say, hey, we're looking to start a seed library. It's super inspiring. And I don't know all of the people on this call right now. So yeah, if you could go and fill out that form and let us know who you are, and especially if you are connected to a seed library, that would be amazing. Thank you.
Oh yeah, David, you bring up a good point as well. I know one of the things that you all have been trying to do is get, connect the seed libraries more to each other. And I should have added this to our presentation because I can see we have some other people from other seed libraries. We're trying to harvest more seeds ourselves than we did last year, trying to get an excess of things, especially because the garden is going to be renovated. We know that not all the plants are going to survive the renovation. And so we're trying to harvest more seeds than we did last year so that we can potentially trade seeds with other seed libraries and not just individual people.
Well, I have a quick question, and it came up, it was actually in relation to a previous question. There was something about concerns or have you thought about genetic diversity? And so when I think native seeds, and I've been part of projects in the past where we've done a native seed garden, we actually went out to the wild to find populations of native seeds and harvest the seeds there. And I'm just wondering, is that something you do as well as just collect from the garden? Because yeah, I think as the garden gets bigger, even if it's bigger, it's still your mock orange population is going to be smaller than if you find a wild patch somewhere of mock orange, probably. So just curious, yeah.
Yeah, that's a good question. We haven't done that yet. Not all the seeds. We've only done it for a couple of the plants that have maybe weren't so successful in our garden. So for example, we have 2 very, very, very small ozoberry trees. And usually the birds and the squirrels will eat those ozoberries before we get a chance to harvest any seeds from them. And so actually this past year when I was doing a workshop across in Lafarge Lake at their inspiration garden, I noticed that the trail along the lake has a huge ozoberry population. And so we did actually take some ozoberries from Lafarge Lake there to put into our seed library just because our seedlings are so small. But I haven't considered it for things like the mock orange or the Nootka rose, where we get more than enough seeds from our own garden. I haven't considered going out to any wild areas yet. I would want to do my research, and make sure that, we're not negatively impacting those areas in any way, and, not taking more than we need. And I think right now where the seed library is at, most of the plants within the garden can make their own. And then hopefully, hopefully the hope is once again, people who are growing these plants in their own garden, maybe they'll start to get a little bit of their own diversity there because, there could be some cross-pollination with other plants in their area as well. And so even though the seeds are coming from our plants, hopefully by sharing those seeds and spreading them across the lower mainland, we can help keep that biodiversity up that way as well.
And it looks like there's another question there about asking, so would you trade with seed libraries only in your region? That's from Mojave, and I'm assuming, is that in reference to some of these seeds potentially being invasive in other regions?
Right, yeah, if I get a request from a seed library, I would go ahead and do a little bit more research on that. Like I'd look at the seeds that they're requesting, right? So if the library can send me a list of the seeds that they want, I would look up each of those plants and see if they are also native to that region. And if they are, then that's great, then I can share them with them. I don't have the time to do that, obviously, for every person that I lend seeds out to, but happy to go that extra little mile for other seed libraries.
Great. And speaking of seed libraries, I'm just going to pop in the chat. At Farm Folk City Folk, we have a directory of seed libraries, which the IUE is a part of, and a lot of other seed libraries in the region. So in case you're not on the list, you can request to get added to the list, or if you are looking for a seed library nearby you, you can also look up to see what is close by you. There's a nice map that will help you with that. Great, looks like we have another question. What software do you use for, oh wait, no, sorry, I'm already, never mind.
I think we did that one. Did I miss any of those ones? Yeah, I think maybe also to just expand on the sharing with seed libraries too. I would want to make sure that I discuss with those seed libraries and kind of maybe ask them, okay, so where do you lend seeds to? Do you restrict the region where you send seeds? Just to make sure that we're all being responsible in where we send seeds. We don't want to send them, to a library where it's native, but then, have them accidentally send it off somewhere where it's not supposed to be. But yeah, definitely open to the idea as long as we're doing our research and due diligence to make sure that we're not spreading the seeds out of their natural regions. Well, I think that's a question more for you guys.
We would like to include all seed libraries in our directory. I mean, if you don't actually lend to the public and you don't want them to get in touch with you, then maybe let us know that, and maybe we could just make sure to add that information so you don't get inundated with people. But yeah, we're really interested in connecting all seed libraries, and part of the reason is maybe potentially a lot more of these interlibrary exchanges of seeds. I think we could probably all benefit from working together.
And speaking of schools, for the Citizen Seed Trial this year, we've chosen to do early season crops, so it'll be more compatible with schools. And we're also hoping to have a bunch of PowerPoints and activities up on our website in the new year for teachers to use in seed stewardship education purposes.
Okay, so there's a couple of questions here about the boundaries. Mojev says, I like the idea of spreading out of natural regions, such as would salal grow in shaded creek areas in a drier area that is naturalized. Even broom has a location I've been wandered into in Lytton. I think I just need to clarify the word natural. Oh, I think I just need to clarify what we mean by natural region. I don't mean like I'm not referring to like a a naturalized park or individual place, but more of the places within the province where those plants naturally grow. Because I know salal is a very common understory plant here in the coastal temperate rainforest, but I don't know if it's quite as common in the Okanagan or somewhere where it's hotter, and that might be just because of the plant preference itself. I think it does prefer a bit of a shadier, moist climate. But we just want to make sure, you know, a lot of these plants are prolific seed makers and spreaders. And so we want to make sure that we're not introducing something into a region of the province or the country where it's not supposed to be, where it could potentially displace the native plants that are supposed to be in that region. So, I mean, I have no problem with people growing these plants on their balconies or, you know, around a kid's playground. That is fine as long as it's in the region of the province where that plant is known to naturally occur. And this kind of goes into the next question there, where can you find out what the boundaries are for the native seeds? I use a really great book. I don't have it here at home with me. I should have brought it. There's a fabulous book called The Native Plants of the Pacific Northwest. I think even if you look for a reliable resource online, so don't just take anything off Google. Again, maybe Siri or David have a good online resource that shows. But in this book, they have maps that'll show you, you know, where specifically this plant can be found in the wild. And so I would probably refer to that book and also look for something online that has a map of the regions. I think maybe UBC has an index like that. Do you guys know of any online sort of maps?
I don't really know. I have the same book though.
I was just trying to search for one, and I'm sure they're out there. I would also propose, not that it happens quickly, but plants don't really look at maps the same way humans do, and we know climates are changing, and so these boundaries are going to obviously change over time for sure. Not any reason to just throw plants out anywhere, but just we shouldn't get too fixated on our human plant boundaries, I think, as the weather changes.
Great. Well,
Yeah, that's a very good point.
Well, at that, we're coming close to 10:30, and I just want to give everybody a break before our next session. So coming up next is we have a local library panel, and it's going to talk about how to get seed returns and engage your local community members, a panel discussion of seed libraries that are actually in public libraries. That starts at 11 a.m. You should have your Zoom link in your emails. And I'm just going to plop our poll one more time into the chat here. So thank you all for joining us, and thank you so much, Naomi, for presenting. It was such a pleasure.
Thank you so much. I'll just quickly touch on Ruth's question there really quick. I have considered making little mixed packages. We often give them out when I'm out doing public events, like we were at the Salmon Come Home Festival in Coquitlam. And we had a little winter sowing mix pack to give people. So it's definitely something that we could consider. Yeah, but I think right now, you know, with the seed library brochure and not restricting people on what they can ask for, you know, if you want to make your own custom mix, we're happy to send you seeds from, again, all the varieties that you think would do well in your garden.
Awesome. I'm glad we were able to answer everybody's question. That's excellent. Yeah, this was such a good session. I feel like we had a good kickstart. I hope everybody watched the Seeds of Vandana Shiva. I watched it Thursday night at the New West Public Library. It was a really great movie, and you still have access to it till Sunday. So I would definitely recommend watching if you haven't watched it yet.
Well, thank you again, everyone. And if you come up with any other questions, I'm happy to answer them. Just shoot us an email there. Again, it's the IUE@douglascollege.ca.
Okay. Thanks, everybody.
Okay.
See you later.